I'm Ron Hill, and welcome to Management and the Future, brought to you by Dalhousie University's Institute of Public Affairs and the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. This year's series includes some of the most requested programs shown over the past 4 years. Today's program on women in the workforce is taken from the 1980 series and features Beth Putman Williams of the management consulting firm Westerland Eman Limited, in conversation with Professor David Benner, associate with the Institute of Public Affairs, Dalhousie University.
Beth, why is women's participation in the workforce so important in the future?
Well, first let me say, Dave, I'm glad you put it that way. Why is it important? Because I still have people asking me questions like, should women work? But if people stop and look around them, and if you look at the statistics, in November '79, women comprised 40% of the Canadian workforce. That represented 49% of the total Canadian female population. So it's not should they work, but how should they work and why is it going to be important? So as I say, I like the way you put it. I think their participation in the workforce is going to be important for a couple of very basic reasons. The first reason is an out-and-out economic reason. First off, as companies continue into the 80s in somewhat of an economic slump that we have been in, they're going to find that the return on investment they can get through technology or through equipment is going to diminish more and more because they won't have the money to invest, and also because the sophistication of technology is already such that they're going to have to get a return some other way, and that other way is perhaps going to be through investment in their human resources. Now, when you talk about human resources, one of the most underutilized resources in almost all companies is that human resource which happens to be female. So it's going to be an important economic reason. As well, companies are going to find that they're going to have to produce more with the same amount of resources or less. Therefore, in fact, they're going to have to make, again, better use of what they've already got. As well, I think a lot of companies are going to find themselves competing in a pretty tight market for capability. There's simply not enough trained people in Canada right now in some industries, in some areas, to carry out the jobs available. So from an economic standpoint, women are going to be an important contributor to the bottom line of companies.
Are there other social factors that are important to this?
Oh, very definitely. Women have worked long and hard to get to the level that they have in business and industry today, and they're simply not going to go away. So another reason they're going to be important in the 80s is that they are here to stay.
What are some historical precedents, Beth, to the situation that women find themselves in today?
Well, I guess we could go right back to one of the most interesting and preliminary starts to the social trend back in 1876, when Dr. Emily Howard Stowe founded the Toronto Women's Literary Club. And it was called the Literary Club because that group was still sufficiently timid that they did not want to perhaps upset the social norms and values or disturb the perspective of what women should be in society. So they called themselves the Literary Club, but in fact they were the founders of the women's suffrage movement in Canada, which of course went for the vote. The vote being perhaps one of the most obvious ways to gain representation in society and in business. The vote was achieved in Canada starting in 1916 in the West through 1925 in the Maritime provinces and finally in Quebec in 1940, and at the federal level somewhere in 1918. And so that seemed to be an important point in our history.
Wow, it sounds like women were really on their way at that point.
Well, they thought so, Dave, but they got a nasty surprise in 1928 when they were told they weren't legal people. And that all happened back in 1916. Our first female magistrate, Emily Ferguson Murphy, brought down a decision against a person in court. The defense lawyer got uppity about it and said, well, he didn't like the decision and it didn't stand anyway because as she was not legally a person, she didn't have legal status as a magistrate, therefore the decision didn't stand. Well, as you can imagine, she didn't take kindly to that. The Alberta Supreme Court did uphold her decision, but she brought it to Ottawa. She pursued the issue for 9 years, got nowhere. She finally petitioned Mackenzie King in 1927, who passed it to the Supreme Court of Canada, and in 1928 they said that women were not, under the terms of the BNA Act, legally people. That was not good enough, so Ferguson Murphy and her valiant five went off to England, and finally it took the Privy Council in England in 1929 to declare women as people. So there was a little bit more to achieve than just getting the vote.
Yeah. Well, now, as I understand history, in the World Wars, the role of women in the Canadian workforce did significantly change. Could you relate to that a little bit?
In both World War I and World War II, women did make gains, but they were relatively short-lived. During the war themselves, the stereotypes of women were severely challenged because women did in fact enter all sorts of job categories. They performed well, often with shortened training periods, and in fact people then had to step back and say, well, you know, maybe they can do some of the things we never thought women could do. As well, in fact, they did open up job opportunities because they did participate in the various trades. They also brought their salary a little bit more in line with men. However, as soon as both wars finished, it happened at the end of World War I, it also happened at the end of World War II. Women were politely or not politely asked to resume their rightful place in society, that being perhaps back in female-based occupations or back in the home where they belonged anyway.
Okay, now what happened during the Depression, Beth? I understand that women were shoved out summarily after the World Wars. You have a depression where there aren't that many jobs for anybody. What role did women take in the economy at that point?
Well, the jobs went to the men. If there was a job to be had, it was to go to a breadwinner. Breadwinners were seen to be the men. Even though many women were single, divorced, or had to support their husband's income, that did not seem to be a good enough reason to allow women continuing opportunity. As well, I guess everybody was struggling hard, but women were struggling sufficiently hard to just keep afloat that they didn't have a lot of energy for this elusive search for social justice.
Okay, so now the stage is set for the 60s and 70s, and now the 80s. Obviously, some things coalesce to produce the changes that women have experienced in the workplace so far. Could you summarize what those factors were?
In the 60s and 70s, there were a number of forces that allowed women, again, to become very aware of their values, their worth, their interests, their needs, and also there were a number of things that contributed to opportunities for women to get back into the workforce. Such things as improved household gadgetry. A lot more things were automated in the kitchen, therefore women had a lot more time to become interested and involved in things outside the home. As well, all of this household gadgetry, of course, cost money, so there was the evolving need for perhaps the second income as well. So they went out into the workforce because they had the time, they had the interest, but also they needed the money. Beyond that, the increased freedom from both childbearing and child-rearing responsibilities was a contributor to getting women into the workforce. That, of course, happened in the form of birth control and daycare centers. Beyond that, though, I think it's fair to say that there just was an overall heightened awareness of women's worth and value to themselves, and there was a heightened felt need to get out there and to meaningfully participate and contribute and to assume their rightful place as full citizens.
Given the attention that media has given to women's role in society in recent years, one might assume that there have been significant gains. What is the current status of women in the Canadian workforce? What kinds of jobs do they have, and what kinds of pay do they get?
Well, it's probably true. People do assume that there have been significant gains, but perhaps they're not quite as significant as one would think. For instance, a survey published by the Conference Board in July '79, I believe it was, indicated that women still hold less than 1% of the 13,000 public and private directorships there are available in Canadian business and industry. Mind you, this was a slight increase from the 1973 figure, but less than 1% is hardly fair representation at the senior-most levels of power and influence in our corporate structure. In terms of looking at a couple typical job classification areas, in terms of the clerical area, according to the '71 census in Canada, women did occupy 72% of clerical positions, as one would expect. However, when we look at something like the managerial and the proprietary job categories, women only represented 13% of that job classification. It's interesting to look at professional categories, because in the professional category they represented 41%, and people might think, well, gee, that's high enough, isn't it? But you have to look carefully, because that includes nursing and teaching, which again are two of the most traditional female-based work areas. So in terms of their representation by level in organizations and also by job classification, perhaps women haven't made quite the strides that they could or they should or they would like to. We'll have to wait to see the 1981 census figures, but I would bet that the pattern won't be sufficiently different.
Beth, could you summarize then sort of the state of the art? What are the major issues now facing women in the workplace in Canada?
Well, one of the major issues is not new at all. It continues to be, I think, the underlying issue in this whole area, and that is the traditional stereotype of the appropriate role of women in the workforce. Women belong first and foremost in their home, their wives and their mothers. And that leads to a whole range of assumptions. Now, mind you, we all know we don't make assumptions, but let's meet my friend Fred and see what this business of assumptions is all about.
I never met a woman I couldn't manage. I never met a woman I couldn't
Meet
manage.
Fred Summers, 42 years old, happily married, father of 3. Good job as sales manager with a manufacturing company.
You can manage any woman.
Contrary to first impressions, Fred is not a sexist. Like most of us, he's just used to seeing men and women a certain way.
But the truth is, I never met a woman I couldn't manage.
Oh, Mr. Summers, here's the plane reservations you wanted. And the hotel's confirmed your room, and I made sure they're going to have a car waiting for you.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. What would I ever do without you?
Oh, hi, honey. I didn't hear you come in.
Hi, sweetheart.
You have a hard day?
Oh, yeah.
Oh. Oh, Fred, the dog got out twice today. Could you please fix the back gate? Please, this time?
Yeah.
Sure, as soon as the football season's over.
You drink, sir?
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to get change.
It's all for you.
Well, thanks.
You know, I never met a woman I couldn't manage.
There's one type of woman Fred has yet to meet.
Mr. Summers? Hi, I'm Gail Murphy. I'm the new manager in the systems division. You sent up a report the other day, and there were a couple of points in it that I didn't quite understand, and, well, I thought we could make an appointment and go over them, if that's all right with you. I tell you what, why don't you call my secretary after lunch, and she'll set up an appointment. It was very nice meeting you.
What? Well, I'll be a manager. Manager of what division? Hey, calm down, Fred. She's just a token female. We've been through all the minorities, and now the women want their turn. Well, if she doesn't fall flat on her face, she'll quit and have a baby. She won't be around here long.
Maybe you'd better rethink that a bit. Token women are quickly becoming a thing of the past. If a woman has made it this far, chances are she's not going to fall flat on her face. And if she has children, more than likely she'll combine family and career. Sure, it's a problem for you. The situation's unfamiliar, alien.
So what do you think, Dave? Can you relate to Fred?
Beth, I can. There are parts of that that make me uncomfortable. They really put me up against some stereotypes that I have. What are some more of these assumptions that men and women have?
Well, there are so many of them, but to name a few, for instance, people have always thought that women only work for pin money. And obviously they behave that way too, because if you want to look at current pay figures for women in the workforce these days. You recall I mentioned the 3 areas of women's participation: managerial, professional, and clerical. Well, 77 Labour Canada figures show that typically the average manager makes 58% more than the average female manager. The average male manager makes that much more than the female manager. Similarly, in the professional category, the average male professional makes 61% more. And again, in the clerical category, even though the clerical category is typically that female-based job area, men still make 64% more than do women. So that's another assumption. And perhaps it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy because people believe that women only work for pin money. In fact, we've got ourselves into a situation where women are paid less. Another assumption might be something like, well, women don't need as much money anyway. Just staying on the money thing for a minute, you've probably heard the phrase, well, that's good money for a woman, you know. And I guess I have to say, well, gee, my meat costs me as much as a man's meat costs him. Now, what's this business about good money for a woman? Another stereotype might be, well, women are not educated to assume higher paid jobs. But again, it's interesting to note that 58% of the people in Canada who hold post-secondary certificates or diplomas are women. Now, mind you, the university degrees are only held 38% by women, but still the trend in our economy in the last few years has been to gravitate towards certificates and diplomas anyway, so we can hardly fault women on their education, in the formal sense anyway. Another thing might be that women aren't reliable, they're sick a lot more. Statistics just don't prove that that's the case.
What about this problem of the dual career, the man and the woman both striving for professional careers?
Well, it is a problem, and again, I guess that's the kind of issue that continues to sometimes allow companies to go ahead and make decisions for women as opposed to allowing women to make those decisions. And to illustrate what I mean, for instance, a company may sit there and say, well, she wouldn't want that promotion because in fact she would have to work late and she has family responsibilities. Therefore, instead of putting her into that position of giving her a career which then would put the family into a dual career position, we'll just not offer it to her. But I mean, speaking of that, you yourself, Dave, are in a dual career situation. You tell me about it.
It is interesting, Beth, and it is fraught with conflict and problems. I'm starting up a new business, a new venture, and my wife is starting a brand new career. And we have 2 small children. So we have a time management problem. We have priorities that we have to set, and we have to communicate constantly about what our needs are every day. Somebody has to be there to pick up the kids, and some days it can be me, and some days it can be my wife. And the point is that we're both trying to create something in the work world for ourselves, and neither of the 2 positions is more important than the other. And when you have 2 people that have high priorities and 2 young children, what we have to do, and other people have other plans and priorities, I'm sure, is I take a day off during the week where I'm just with my children because I'd like them to remember who their dad is. And on the weekends, we do things with our kids. And the rest of the time, we have them in really good daycare, progressive developmental daycare. And I firmly believe that it's the quality, not the quantity of time that you spend with kids are important. But I would be lying to you if I didn't tell you that it's tough.
Well, the children issue is a very important and controversial issue because, again, companies, individuals sometimes assume or continue to assume that, well, what will the impact be of the working mother on children, for instance? Will they grow up all right? Will they turn out all right? And so, again, perhaps companies still are in a position of saying, we won't let her do this, we won't give her that decision to make, we won't put her in this horrible position by simply making a decision for her that will keep her away from those kinds of things, because, again, we know that she has children and we know that her role is to be a mother and a wife. And of course, there's another whole aspect of this too, Dave, this business of women in workforce, and that's the concern around general social interaction in the office. A lot of people are very nervous about what happens when you put men and women together in an office. A lot of people feel that that's going to cause problems.
What kinds of assumptions are predominant in the culture regarding what women want to do? What is their proper role in society? What kind of assumptions are there in those areas?
Well, again, I guess it gets back to women probably don't. We can maybe talk about what people assume women don't want to do for a minute. Women won't want to travel. Women won't want to relocate. Women won't want to have to work late. Women won't want to assume the stress associated with certain levels of responsibility and so on and so forth. But they're kinds of things that, again, are restrictive because they're all on the level of what women won't want to do or wouldn't be interested in doing. And because people think that way, again, they cut off the opportunities available to them. Of course, following along with the assumptions of what women want to do or don't want to do are, of course, the assumptions that come under the heading what women can do anyway. And again, there's still a lot of beliefs about the appropriateness of using women to do certain kinds of work or to put them in certain positions. For instance, the business of having women as managers or women as supervisors of other people is an interesting question. A lot of people are very quick to assume, for instance, that women would not like to be supervised by a woman. Of course, they're equally quick to assume that men would not like to be supervised by a woman. So what do you do with this person who would like to be a supervisor and who also happens to be a female? Just one interesting point about that, there have been some studies done that show that, surprisingly enough, the older man is often the man who can accept women in a managerial or supervisory position, because often those men are the men who can remember Rosie the Riveter from the wars. And they can recall that women took jobs that were non-traditionally female. They did well, they performed, they produced, therefore they must be capable. And now when they have that opportunity to work with a woman again or for a woman, they can accept that that may be an appropriate thing.
What is meant, Beth, by the phrase that you often hear, women are their own worst enemy?
Oh, well, unfortunately, perhaps there's some truth in that. Women are their own worst enemy in a number of ways. First off, women have had a self-image problem, in the sense that I think women are sometimes too quick to see themselves as incapable. Because they see themselves as incapable, then in fact perhaps they won't go out and assume various new responsibilities or more challenging opportunities or whatever the case may be. As a result, they stay at a certain plateau of capability and in fact become incapable at higher levels. You get into a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I believe as a woman I'm not capable and I behave that way, then other people will start seeing me that way. In fact, I won't get opportunities to develop myself, and all of a sudden I'm incapable, just like I thought I was. So there's the whole self-image, self-fulfilling prophecy that is a problem. There is, again, as I mentioned in talking about women in supervision, there is the problem that sometimes is encountered that women are too quick not to accept women themselves, and you're very hard-pressed to tell men, okay, now you sit back and think about these issues and accept women a little more readily when some women won't even accept women. So there's that aspect as well. And I have run into the occasional situation as well where a woman will be successful, she will reach a position of status and authority and power, and all of a sudden she becomes almost a queen bee, and she becomes almost a hostile, aggressive person. She's made it, and boy, if she can make it, everybody has to make it, and they have to make it on their own like she has to. And that, again, I think is sort of one step forward, but 3 steps backwards in terms of getting everybody comfortable with the fact that women have their place and in fact can be equal partners.
Beth, given all of this, what can companies do as practical aids to the development of women as a human resource? What kinds of things can companies do?
The first place to start, I think, Dave, is to sit down and very seriously look at your company to see if, in fact, you're not consciously or unconsciously building in discrimination via your policies, your procedures, the way your company is structured or whatever, and to make sure that you are not continuing the stereotypes and the assumptions that we've been talking about. So the first thing is to sit down and look at the company itself to see if there are ingrained discriminations built in. The second thing would be to get out there and to encourage managers to very seriously consider the assumptions and the stereotypes that they have in their heads, that they carry around, that they overlay on their people. So actually get out there and encourage management awareness around assumptions and the impact of assumptions in this area. Having, I guess, heightened awareness of some of the issues and concerns, another thing companies might do is actually get out there and build skills on the part of their people. Build skills to be able to relate to each other, build skills to be able to cope with change, which is really what we're talking about, and which is a very difficult thing for a lot of people to cope with. On the part of women, they may have to get out and offer training to bring women's capability up to speed, because in fact they may be lacking. They may have to offer courses in such things as assertiveness training as well as technical skills training. So there's a training aspect that I think companies can offer to their people. There's also just I guess a continuing reinforcement and encouragement around feeling comfortable with change, seeing people as individuals, and practicing good human resource techniques such as encouraging people to set goals for themselves, encouraging people to career plan, encouraging people to put together personal development plans, and then encouraging everyone to play fair, letting men be people and letting women be people.
The message I'm getting is that men and women are individuals, and if companies can just treat people as individuals, it'll go a long way toward solving this problem. I know that from time to time I think I'm a fairly enlightened male, and something will happen where a woman friend of mine will point out to me an area where I have a blind spot, and it seems to me that management awareness training at a formal level in a corporation might really facilitate men and women straightening out the assumptions and getting with the notion that all people are people, have resources, and can offer those to corporations.
Well, there is a lot of that happening, Dave. In fact, that film clip we saw with Fred in it is part and parcel of an effort going on that came out of a McGraw-Hill film, for instance, Women in Management, Threat or Opportunity. And that kind of film is being used to stimulate discussion in groups of just men, in groups of just women, and then in groups together, to simply bring the issue to fore, to let people to start talk about these things and to become comfortable.
That concludes today's program on women in the workforce. Join us tomorrow at the same time for the program Work Values and Attitudes with Professor David Banner and Graham McIntyre of the Advanced Management Center, Dalhousie University.